Hello everyone, I'm pleased to be back on chillTV with a special edition of Penner's Politburo. This week, my guest is our MLA Laurie Throness, the member of the BC Legislature elected to represent the constituency known as Chilliwack-Kent. Hi Laurie, nice to have you join me and the rest of our audience, and even nicer that you're keeping your distance.
We are keeping more than 6 feet apart, Barry, as is the order from the Chief Provincial Health Officer.
Yes, we're trying to lead by example here. So this is a little bit different than previous Penner Politburos in that we're not sitting side by side, as our viewers will notice, but we are in the same general area, same facility. Due to the coronavirus issue, we know that the Medical Health Officer of British Columbia, Dr. Bonnie Henry, has suggested that, has indicated that people need to keep a distance of 2 meters from each other. That's about 6 feet. Although not quite 2.5 sword lengths as is required in the BC Legislature, but close enough. Well, let's jump right into it, Laurie. This interview will focus on just one topic, the coronavirus pandemic and what is happening around us. And things have been happening quickly around us. Tell us what's happened over at the BC Legislature in Victoria. Is the spring session, which started just last month, now adjourned until further notice?
Well, just let me comment that 2 weeks ago, we were watching events happen in Wuhan, China, and suddenly it's on our doorstep and people are dying right in BC. So this thing has just flooded BC. There's no other news. Everything is about COVID-19. And so the legislature will be sitting. It will be sitting on Monday. We're scheduled to go back, but only a handful of MLAs are going back. In a time like this, we sort of drop partisan considerations and we all work together for the health of all British Columbians. So we're working together with the government right now to get a bit of legislation passed. I'm not exactly sure what's on the table, but only a few MLAs will be going back and the House will recess for a time and then we'll tack that on at the end of the summer. So we're not going to actually lose any sitting days, but I'm not going to go back next week, I don't think.
Well, that's sounds unprecedented, and I guess that's a word that gets used a lot right now, but It does seem appropriate. However, somebody did think about this. There's a movie I watched actually just last night. It's on Netflix now called Contagion, and I understand many people are watching it, although it was first released in 2011 with actors including Matt Damon, Kate Winslet, and Gwyneth Paltrow, a star-studded cast. It didn't get a lot of attention in 2011, but I can tell you the movie is amazingly accurate. In fact, it's eerie about the scenario of a new virus being emerging out of China and coming from a combination of bats and pigs in a market. But anyway, we have our own reality to deal with here. One of the hats I wear is I'm a public member or director on the board of directors of the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And we first started getting briefed on this in January about what was happening in China and some of the early efforts to try and contain the illness. And we were being told how unlikely that was, that a virus of this nature, given our global connections, would actually stay in one continent. Unfortunately, I think a number of world leaders did think, it was wishful thinking, that somehow the oceans would provide a barrier, but obviously in the 21st century, we're well beyond that, and unfortunately we're seeing the consequences. Here in our area, we've learned recently that schools will remain closed indefinitely after spring break. Now most restaurants, and I believe all pubs, are closed. And even more distressing for me, and I'm sure many others, the Cham Centre, the Chilliwack Landing Leisure Centre, are closed, posing an extra challenge for parents trying to keep their kids busy because that means those swimming pools are not available to children either. Elective surgeries have been suspended for now, causing even longer waits and suffering for patients. And we all know we have very long wait times throughout our healthcare system. So it's very worrisome for me. But this is all being done in order to try and free up space and prepare for what is anticipated to be a wave of new patients coming into the system. Laurie, what do you make of our response here in BC and Canada so far in terms of steps being taken to address or slow the spread of the virus?
Well, what we're doing right now is called suppression of the virus. And that means that we're not only asking people to self-isolate and finding those who have tested positive and asking them to stay alone. We're actually shutting down bars and restaurants and schools and public places, as you mentioned, in an attempt to stop the transmission. If we don't do that, the consequences are dire. That means our health system will be flooded with patients, and we can't cope with that, and more people will die as a result. Last night there was a study by the Imperial College in London, and it was a scary study. It said that if nothing was done in the States, 4 million people would die. That's 1% of the American population. So if you do mitigation measures, half of those will die, maybe 2 million. And so they need to go one step beyond mitigation, which is just asking people to self-isolate and actually start shutting down parts of society. And the ideal is that we would all sit alone in a room for 3 weeks, and if we could do that, then everything would be fine. But human beings are social beings. We have families, we have jobs we have to go to, we take public transit, we have to shop, and so there are all kinds of interaction between humans. But the idea is to get as close as possible to that scenario of where everybody is just sitting alone in a room for 3 weeks. And that's what we're trying to do right now. And so, of course, we support those efforts. I mean, this is crucial that we do this. And so that's why we're sitting far apart today.
Yes, that's why. And it's nothing personal, Laurie. It's been frustrating to see some of the comments on social media, and unfortunately repeated by certain elected leaders south of the border, saying that this is not that serious because, well, look at the annual seasonal flu. And I think that can be very confusing for the public because, of course, we're aware of the flu, and it's true. That has a significant impact every year. A certain percentage of people need hospital care, and a small percentage of those will actually succumb every year to the seasonal flu. But the point that needs to be driven home is that this new illness is on top of everything else. It doesn't displace the existing caseload that's already in the hospitals. And we all know our hospital system, healthcare system, is usually run just about right to the max. In fact, our viewers may not be aware of just how few intensive care beds are actually available at any given time. All of Fraser Health, in our health authority here, which runs from Hope to New Westminster and everywhere in between, has 80 ICU beds, with 6 of those here at Chilliwack Hospital. And according to some excellent reporting recently done by Tyler Olson at the Abbotsford News, 90% of those beds were already full earlier this month. So that means there's 10% available. 10% of 80 beds means there are 8 ICU beds available in the whole Fraser region, which has a population of 1.6 million people. So that's why when you start to calculate percentages, and it might not sound a lot with 5 to 10% needing hospitalization if they got the coronavirus, well, 5% of 1.6 million people, I'm doing the math on the fly here, is 80,000. And we only have 6 beds here at the Chilliwack Hospital and 8 available beds across the whole region at this time in ICU. So that indicates why the health officials in British Columbia and elsewhere are taking this matter so seriously and now canceling elective surgeries to free up space for what we all hope will not happen, but which evidence elsewhere suggests may well happen, and that is a run on our hospitals. Now, Laurie, obviously, these numbers give all of us concern. Is this, in your understanding, why our medical leaders are so keen to do what's called flattening the curve?
Oh, very much. We have to space out the demand for hospital beds over time so that the medical system can cope with this. Because more people will survive if we can give them treatment. But if everybody comes in at once to the hospital, we can't give them treatment. And I just want to underscore here that people over 70 and people with compromised immune systems are really at grave risk here. And so the key for them is that they need to stay indoors, they need to stay put and ask people to shop for them, to ask friends and family to shop for them, to bring groceries to their doorstep and leave it on their doorstep, and not to have any contact with anybody outside their own home. Like, this is really important in the next few weeks. And people don't seem to realize, outside we have cars whizzing by and you can go to the shopping mall and shop, or you can still go to some restaurants in Chilliwack, but things are happening very quickly here. The numbers of cases are doubling every few days, and this is a grave risk to people over 70 especially. So I hope that they're taking this very seriously. We ought not to be deterred by the fact that the weather is beautiful to say that we can go out and that everything's normal. It's not. We're in a real crisis mode here. So I hope people are taking it seriously and getting the message and cutting off contact with the outside world for a while.
I overheard a conversation 2 nights ago when an establishment was still open, it's now closed, with a couple of younger guys, people in their 20s, wondering what all the excitement was about and saying that they were going to be just fine. And,
probably, Barry, they will be if they're younger.
But they could be carriers.
But they could be carriers.
And spread it to people that will not be fine.
Exactly.
So that's the message we need to drive across. This affects everybody.
Yes.
And the responsibility rests with everyone. But I also acknowledge how hard it is to change habits. So just to make it personal, you know, my parents are in their 80s, and they love to get together with my children once a week for dinner. That's not happening. And so it's having an immediate effect on people, and it's not all positive, but we know if we can buckle down, take this seriously, hopefully within a few weeks we can resume some form of normal.
And, you know, we want to point out, Barry, that this will pass. This is a temporary situation, but it's at a crisis point right now where in the next couple of weeks, cases could double every couple of days, and we could have 400 or 500 people dying a day, as it is in Italy right now. And, you know, it could be a real terrible situation. And so we want to practice social distancing and really impress upon everyone the need to do that.
Beyond the health issues, I know many people are concerned about economic impacts.
Yeah.
So if we stay home, that means we're not working. And for many of us, that means if you're not working, you're not getting paid. And for those employers who still try to maintain payments to their employees who are not working, eventually their bank accounts run out as well if they're not producing goods and services. So it really feels like the wheels of commerce and industry are locking up. In response, governments of all stripes are talking about spending massive amounts of money to try and keep people employed or at least funded, and businesses to try and keep those businesses out of bankruptcy court. Deficit spending is going to be back with a vengeance. We're hearing these announcements almost by the hour. Although, to be fair, our federal government deliberately started spending more than it was taking in already when Prime Minister Trudeau was elected in 2015, even though at that time the economy was firing on all cylinders. So I just want to take this opportunity to point out that this is why it makes sense in good times not to run a deficit.
Sure does.
And to save fiscal room so you have it to spare when you need extra juicing of the economy. And in other words, keeping your fiscal powder dry by maintaining balanced budgets in good times. We still have some margin to spend, but we're using up that margin at a rapid rate. And again, I think it just underscores the importance of trying to maintain balanced budgets in good times, because you never know what's around the corner. Nobody saw this, well, I guess some people did see this coming, as we saw with the movie Contagion, and medical experts have been saying for some time that another pandemic was probably imminent, but here it is. But if it isn't this, you know, it could be earthquakes, it could be floods, and that's why it's important for governments to maintain fiscal room for these emergencies. What are your thoughts, Laurie, on what should happen at this stage in terms of government action?
Well, you know, government has been following Bonnie Henry's advice, our provincial health officer's advice, and that's good, and we support that. But that's not really a test of the government. That's sort of a test of Bonnie Henry. The test of the government has yet to come. Will the government be able to help businesses that will otherwise not survive? Will it help workers who get laid off? How will it help people pay their rent and their mortgage and so on? So government is going to have to step up and backstop society in some way for these weeks. And probably it will have to go into a deficit position. But we want, of course, to conserve our resources because we don't know what lies ahead. This thing could last for a year. There could be different waves of the virus. And so we have to make sure and spend as little as possible and still do the job of keeping vulnerable people whole. And so we as opposition are going to be watching the government very carefully, working with the government to make sure that we maintain the health of British Columbians, but also that we be prudent in our spending so that we can conserve our resources for the long term.
Right. In an emergency, often prudence goes out the window, and I just hope there's not too much wasteful spending that takes place. And we all know more spending will be required I just hope that it's effective.
Exactly.
Making it more personal here for a moment, have you adjusted your schedule? What impact has this done to you? Because I know that the job of an MLA is to be out and about in the community, and I know from following your social media feeds, you're often attending many events in our community as our MLA, which is what MLAs do when they're not in Victoria at the legislature. So what impact has this had on your schedule?
Well, I can tell you that all events have been canceled, not by me, but by the event planners. Everything has been canceled. I've closed my office, and I'm working from home. My staff is working from their home. So we are open for business, but we're not physically there. And I didn't want to put my staff in jeopardy, nor do I want to be a vector, which is what the word to use. I don't want to infect anybody because I don't know if I'm carrying the virus. Nobody actually knows until they've been tested. So I'm working from home. I'm busy. I'm answering constituents' queries and trying to help constituents, but really all the other issues that were percolating, and I'm always working on probably 50 issues, all of those have been put on the back burner, and everything is about COVID-19 right now and will be for the foreseeable future.
I think you're right about that. Well, thank you. That's all the time we have today. I want to thank you very much for joining me on this important show. Best of luck with social distancing to you, Laurie, and to all of our viewers as well. Keep well.
Thank you.